I think we'll go ahead and get started unless someone raises a hand on the panel. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Kristen Connolly. I'm the president and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council. Welcome to the Talent and Education Task Force meeting. We're real excited about the program we've got organized today, which will be a discussion, brief presentations by Senator Steve Glazer and Cal State East Bay President Leroy Morishita, and a Q&A session with them. So this is a really important opportunity at a historically challenging and extraordinary time in our state and our nation's and our world's history. Higher education is on the mind of lots of people. And so we are really gratified and appreciate the opportunity to have this meeting today. I think that we're all in for a really good learning experience. Part of that learning experience is trying out a new format. So we're using the webinar function and Zoom today. So those of you who are used to zooming in and seeing yourself in a box with video running, that's not how this is going to be conducted. We have groups of folks that are joined as attendees. And so you have an opportunity to submit questions. If you use your cursor and scroll down, you'll be able to see that there's a Q&A section. And so you can submit questions through that function that the panelists will be able to see. But we do not have, you don't get speaking privileges, and we wanted to streamline the video. So I welcome your feedback on the other side of this meeting in terms of what you thought about this format. We are recording it, and we're planning on posting it in the members only portal of the East Bay Leadership Council website. So just a couple things. I definitely wanted to just thank Bob Linscheid and Jake Brimner, our two task force co-chairs, for all their great work in planning this meeting and all they do for us in advance. At a difficult time on May 14th, when Governor Newsom presents his May revise, you know, there's going to be a lot of challenges for the state, and we're not diving deep into the budget today, but just know that it's on our mind, and it's something that we're going to be working closely with our legislators on in terms of the importance of protecting higher education. Something I've been talking about for years is the importance of supporting, really protecting funding for education, particularly community college funding and higher ed funding at a time when, and certainly K-12 funding is important, at a time when there are really big challenges facing the revenue stream for the state of California. So look for us to stay continued and engaged, but we don't anticipate, we're not going to be taking any policy positions today. We're here to learn from our panelists and engage in a conversation. So the format for today is we're going to be, Jake's going to be introducing Senator Glazer, Bob's going to be introducing the president of Cal State East Bay. They're each going to be giving some brief opening remarks. And then we're going to be having a moderated Q&A discussion, and Jake Brimner, our task force co-chair, is going to be handling that. But before I pass things on, I do want to make sure that you've marked your calendar for May 28th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We will be having our East Bay Leadership Series luncheon with Connor Doherty, who's a New York Times reporter who recently wrote a book about the California housing crisis and all things California housing. It's called Golden Gates. I highly recommend it. It's a terrific read, and we're really looking forward to that discussion with Connor. So that's May 28th. We're going to be live streaming that, and so look for details. So if you haven't registered already, please do so on our website. And with that, I will turn it over to Jake. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you all for joining us this morning, in particular, President Morishita and Senator Glazier. I think Senator Glazier is likely someone who needs little introduction on the line today. However, as a refresher, Senator Glazier was elected to the 7th Senate District of California in 2015 in a special election before being elected to a full term in 2016. And some of you already realize how expansive the 7th District is, stretching from Pittsburgh to Brentwood, down to Livermore, and of course, back to Orinda, and everything in between. So a large and very diverse district spanning Contra Costa and Alameda County. And of course, I mentioned Orinda because Senator Glazier, prior to serving in the California State Legislature, served a number of terms on the Orinda City Council, as well as mayor of Orinda. Up in Sacramento, he served as senior advisor to Governor Jerry Brown prior to entering his own elective service and currently serves as the chair of the Business, Professions, and Economic Development Committee, which actually oversees the private post-secondary education regulations in California, and also serves as a member on the Senate committees on agriculture, government organization, insurance, and relevant to today's conversation, education. Many of you on the line who've worked with our Talent and Education Task Force know that I work at the Campaign for College Opportunity in my day job, where I've been very grateful to see Senator Glazier's leadership as chair of the Select Committee on Student Success and leading conversations, particularly around student success at the California State University, where we know the senator has a deep level of experience and knowledge spanning from his days as an undergraduate, when he was a student leader and president of the student body at San Diego State University, before in more recent years serving as a member of the California State University Board of Trustees. So I could go on, but I'll stop there and let my colleague Bob introduce President Morishita.
Thanks very much, Jake. Leroy Morishita was the 5th president of the California State University East Bay. Prior to that, Leroy was the CFO and vice president of business and finance at San Francisco State. Leroy was an exceptional leader, or is an exceptional leader, and one of the things that we appreciate most about him is his extreme knowledge in the area of academic finance. Leroy has been the leader in the presidents at the Cal State system in that regard, and we've really appreciated his support. I first met Leroy in 2005 when the master plan for higher education there at San Francisco State was underway, and we bonded nicely and joined Steve in supporting Leroy's appointment at the time we were on the board to the presidency at Cal State East Bay. So we really appreciate both of them being there today for us. And Jake, I think I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Bob. And one last thing I failed to mention that I think is relevant to the conversation today is that in the past several weeks, I think many folks back in the East Bay have been really grateful to Senator Glazier and his team for convening a number of telephone town halls to keep district residents apprised of the ever-changing situation, both in the health context, but also in how our public agencies and the essential services we're relying on are shifting each passing day. So we're really glad that the senator could join us today in that same spirit of using these new formats to help keep folks in the East Bay up to date, current, and engaged in these really important issues. So we'll let Senator Glazier start and provide some opening remarks.
Well, very good. Thank you, Jake. Thank you for the very nice introduction. Thank you for all your good work at the Campaign for College Opportunity. Really have been a great leader in student success initiatives for many, many years. And it's always good to see my friend Bob Linscheid here, a colleague on the Board of Trustees, a great education leader. He and I go back to our student days. We never left, right, Bob? Him at Chico State in student leadership, me at San Diego State. It's been fun to see the pathways each of us have taken that kind of lead back to kind of the same place. But it was great to serve on the board under Bob's leadership as chair of the board. And of course, it's an honor to be on here with President Morishita, a great education leader, great university leader for our state for so many years. He was set to retire, but given the circumstances, I think his arm was bent and he agreed to hang on a little longer as we get through these difficult times, right, that we're experiencing right now. But Jake, thank you for mentioning in the introduction the work that we're trying to do under this COVID-19 crisis. I know this call, this engagement happens at an unprecedented time. Everybody is in unusual circumstances. I hope that those who are on the call are safe and that loved ones are safe and that they haven't experienced the illness that has been so difficult to deal with for so many. And I'm also aware that there may be people on the call whose businesses are suffering with the shelter in place. We did have a town hall on the issue of small business, and the impacts are just enormous, and obviously not just on businesses, but on people. Unemployment claims are in the millions over the last few weeks. So it's a tough time for everybody. I know we're going to talk about education, higher education now, but I just want to underscore how difficult it has been for so many, and many on this call, and our hearts go out to you. And obviously we're here to be resources to help you wherever we can. And maybe that will come up in the questions that you might ask outside of a higher education, but please let our offices be resources to you and be helpful to you. Well, we're talking about higher education, and it is in some ways deja vu all over again for those who have been in this space for a while. And I know I call him Chair Linscheid. He will always be our chair, our board chair. But you know, he went through the difficulties in 08 and 09 and 010 with the budget meltdown. And unfortunately, I think we're going to be facing that same circumstance. And you know, and Bob can talk about those experiences as well as I can. The tuition, the massive tuition increase in 2011 and 12, and just impacts throughout the budget were great. And here's the situation is that when you look at the state budget, and the governor has already made it clear that he thinks that the budget going forward is going to be billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars short. When you break down the budget of California, you realize that so much of the spending is already preset, over 50% for K through 12 or K through 14, because the community colleges get some of that. Health and welfare gets about a third of the budget. And a lot of that's built in because it's matched by federal dollars. So you don't want to lose those substantial matches that come. And so when it comes down to discretionary spending for the legislature, there are three categories that fall into that space. The courts, parks and recreation, and higher education, meaning CSU and UC. And so we're trying to now make choices in a budget where our discretion is very limited. And that is why in the economic recession of 08 through 12, 13 arguably, higher education received the vast majority or a huge proportion of the cuts. During that period of time, CSU lost $500 million in funding, $500 million out of a budget that was around, state budget was around $2 billion. Overall budget might have been $4 billion. So it was a substantial hit, and it caused a lot of tuition increases and incredible disruption. And so I think that's what we're looking at again. That's my crystal ball. The governor is going to come out with his May revise in a week or so. It's expected to be kind of a maintenance baseline budget that won't incorporate all the cuts because we deferred tax payments until July from April 15. It means we don't have a clear picture of our revenue circumstance for another couple months. And so I expect that the budget that we will pass will be a placeholder budget, and that's by a constitutional deadline of June 15. The governor will sign it by June 30, but most of the communication among leadership is that it's just a placeholder, that after the revenue forecasts are clear in July, that we'll come back in with what's called budget trailer bills. And those are going to be very difficult bills and very difficult votes because it's likely to have the substantial reductions that across the state. Now, we have a reserve that we've been setting aside for a number of years, exceeds $16 billion. There's limitations on that reserve in terms of how much we can use it each year. So it's not like we can put $16 billion to fill the gap in the upcoming year. It'll be much less than that, maybe less than half, but it's not going to be enough. And so, that's the broad financial circumstances facing higher education, meaning UC and CSU. The community colleges are in kind of a different space. They get a guaranteed allocation, but it's a guaranteed on a budget base that's going to substantially be lower. And so they're also going to face some significant issues there. And this comes at a time where we had just, created free community college, and we had just enhanced aid for the community colleges and the four-year institutions in a lot of ways, and a lot of those good intentions and financial support are likely to be in jeopardy. So that's our circumstance. And I know this is a great frustration for everyone involved in higher education, because we had been making so much progress. For those who are familiar with my work on the four-year graduation initiative, it's in getting kids through in 4 years. There's been enormous progress made in the last few years. Getting kids through in 6 years, we can talk about that more, but so many ways there's been great leadership by the university presidents and by the chancellors, principally a CSU issue, not really a UC issue. But CSU 5 years ago, our four-year graduation rate was 19%. And today, with the great efforts of our faculty and administration and student leaders, that graduation rate is now over 25%. And the system has set a goal of getting it to 40% by 2025. So a lot of progress in very short time, all in jeopardy now. Enrollment, and Dr. Morishita can talk about this, they've made choices about who they're enrolling starting in August, and yet they're not going to have a clear picture of their budget until maybe even past that enrollment date. It's just it's an unworkable circumstance for our university leaders. And we're talking about the budget going forward. We're not even talking about the budget impacts of this current year, where revenue's down because they refunded fees for kids who had to, left the dorms, didn't pay didn't need the parking. There's a lot of direct immediate impacts, some of which might be made up by the, federal subsidies. But all in all, it's a big train wreck. Not a surprise given our circumstances. But that's the broader view from Sacramento, and I'm happy to answer questions as we continue this conversation.
Great.
All right, Bob. Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Bob, and thank you, Jake, for having me on here, as well as Senator Glazier. And I do want to echo Senator Glazier's remarks in terms of the budget. He and I did have a chat yesterday, and it was a very, very pleasant conversation. I really enjoyed it a lot, Steve. And but he did say that he'd be talking about some budget things that probably wouldn't make me real happy, but they're reality, and I know it. And so it wasn't that he was going to throw a surprise at all. It was something that we know is coming our way. But thank you, everybody, for having me on here. I really appreciate it. And I do, as Senator Glazer said, I do hope that all of you are healthy and safe and well, as can be, and with your loved ones. And knowing that many of you have had difficulties with your businesses and keeping things going, and I know how difficult that is. It's been quite a whirlwind. As was mentioned, I thought I was going to retire. I thought I was going to walk off without a recession in place and leave the university in great standing and in a great position. And I think our Chancellor, Tim White, thought the same thing. So he and I are both supposed to retire on June 30th, but life gets in the way, as we quickly discover. And things can turn so quickly, so dramatically. It's really hard to imagine anything like this when we came into 2020, right? Then 2020 looked like it was going to be a bright and beautiful year, and we're going to have so many good things happening, so much progress in so many fronts. The economy was booming, and life looked very, very good. And in a short amount of time, life has turned totally differently than anything we've ever imagined. I think probably some sci-fi people, movie guys and women would come up with some sci-fi things that do this, right? They have pandemic, outbreak, everything, and it's really quite amazing. So, and I do note, as Kristen called this, extraordinary, challenging times. No kidding. This is something that nobody had ever imagined. So I'll give you a little update on Cal State East Bay and what we're doing. And for those of you that don't know, I thought I would start off by saying, we do have the 3 campuses, one in Concord, one in Hayward, which is the main campus and has been the one started back in 1957, and Oakland Downtown Center, where we do some courses and training there also as well. Our students, just so you know, 60% of our students are first generation in college. So we really serve a different type of group of students than the University of California in the most part. 45% of our students receive Pell Grants, which are the federal financial aid, which means you're among the most needy population. 75% of our students overall receive financial aid, and over 80% of them are working part-time, full-time to make ends meet. A lot of them are there helping their families. Since they're first gen, they're actually helping their family support their existence. And we're considered one of the most racially diverse four-year public universities in the country. We rank among the top 10 in terms of our diversity. So we really have a very special population of the region well, in terms of both Contra Costa County and Alameda County, but the broader Bay Area region. So what happened? So on March 16th, I got shocked. UC Berkeley suddenly said they're going to go totally online. And I had been having conversations with my colleagues at San Jose State, San Francisco State, and Cal Maritime Academy about that possibility, about going online. That discussion had occurred in a broader way across the CSU amongst the presidents too and the chancellor. But suddenly, here UC Berkeley was going, San Francisco State, San Jose State quickly followed in line. And so on March 17th, we made a decision on our campus after consultation with our academic senate, with our student leadership, that we would pivot to go online too. So we stopped classes for 3 days, got some training for our faculty, and then the following Monday, we began teaching totally online, all of our courses. And so that was really a monstrous pivot for the university. Fortunately for us, 25% of our enrollment is online already. We did a lot that was actually totally online, and only a small bit was hybrid. Hybrid meaning where you do some of the coursework in face-to-face and some of it online. We were really one that did mostly online instruction. So it wasn't learning for those faculty and those students who had been involved, but for the other faculty and students who had never done any online coursework, it's very different. It's very demanding. You have to really be very dedicated, and you have to be disciplined in a way that you don't have to be when you're doing face-to-face. It's kind of like the work world. I'm sure all of you are experiencing that as you have employees that go out and try to work remotely. Can they be as productive as they were when they're in their office? It's very difficult because you have distractions all around you. You have your children, you have your spouses or partners, you have other things pulling at you. And so it's hard to spend the kind of time and dedicated time you did at your workplace. And you also don't get to have the interactions that you had with those employees. So it makes it very difficult. And so that's what the learning process has been. It's been very difficult for our faculty. It's been very difficult for our students. We had to worry about getting them the technological tools. So we were just gathering our IT people. They did fantastic work. They had ordered equipment beforehand, thinking things might happen. They gathered all the equipment they had, and we had drive-by pickups. It was kind of like what you get from your store, from your restaurants. We had faculty calling in. First, we did faculty because we wanted to make sure they had the tools. So we had laptops, we had computers, we had monitors, we had cameras, we had hotspots. We gave those out. People drove up, stuck it in their trunk, and they drove off. We then did that with students to make sure they could get access. But there is this thing that everybody has talked about, the digital divide, where certain populations don't have access to technology. So we try to get that into the hands of our students as best we could. Hotspots are a big part because Wi-Fi is an issue. And I didn't realize until now that, if you have Wi-Fi, it's not all equal either. Some of you have much higher speeds of Wi-Fi access. Our video guy, I've done some videos for the campus. I've had to upload on Google Drive to send to him. And then his internet access is slow where he lives. I'm going to work on AT&T to kind of upgrade theirs because that's what he has. But it takes him 5 hours to upload a 4-minute video of me. So he resolved that by driving to the campus, sitting in the parking lot, because we have Wi-Fi access even in the parking lot, picked up a signal, and it was faster to do that, to drive to campus, spend the time, and then drive home rather than wait 5 hours at home waiting for it to upload and hoping that he didn't lose the connection. So there's a difference in terms of people's ability to access and to get the information and to be able to learn online, much less losing jobs, worrying about food insecurities and things like that. So it's been a challenge for our students, but I mean, I think this is our last week of class and we have finals next week, but our enrollment actually dropped this spring semester less than it did last spring. So students have not dropped out as far as I can tell, and we can even watch them in our learning management system, whether they're participating. So we believe that students have hung in there, and we believe our faculty have hung in there. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect whatsoever. Our faculty, some of them I've talked to were kind of distressed at the beginning because they said, I'm not going to be able to provide the type of quality instruction that I did in the classroom, and I know it. But I'll work very hard to try to improve and try to deliver as best I possibly can. And I give them credit. They have. They've worked very, very hard trying to do that. So it's been a big, big change. So our students have suffered, clearly. They have had great difficulties. So we're very fortunate that we did receive federal funding through the CARES Act, which came in two buckets so far, well, 3 buckets now. The first was $7.3 million for Cal State East Bay to give to grants to our students. We have given almost a lot of that money out already. Students that receive financial aid or are eligible to receive financial aid are eligible for those funds. We also have some state university grant monies that we were able to give. We were able to provide monies for undocumented students through that source because we can't do that on the federal side. On the federal side, international students, undocumented students, other students cannot receive the federal dollars. So they can't be part of the 7.3 million, but we had some state monies. We also set up a Presidential Pioneer Emergency Fund. So people have donated to that. And I would ask you if you have some dollars that you're willing to donate, that those dollars go 1 for 1 to our students. We have no administrative fee through our foundation for that. If you donate $1, $1 will get to a student's hands. So we've been doing that and trying to provide for our students. So so far, 10,000 of our 14,015 students this semester have received some financial aid, probably a minimum of $500 and up. And so that's been very, very good. So that's helped our students. They're very appreciative for that. And we're very, very pleased that that could happen. I've been meeting constantly with the leadership of the CSU, the 22 other presidents, and the chancellor of our system. Almost daily, really pretty daily at the beginning, weekends included, and then tapered off to 4 days a week now that we get together and talk. But I've also met with the Bay Area presidents, and twice a year I meet with the community college presidents and chancellors within the East Bay as well as in the peninsula. And so we've had a number of conversations. Everybody's trying to learn from everybody else as best as possible. It's not easy, but we're learning from each other and trying to figure out what is everybody else doing? What are you doing at Stanford? What are you doing over at Cal? What are you doing at Los Medanos? What are you doing, in Contra Costa Community College District? What are the plans? The Community College District, as Senator Glazer spoke about, they actually are a little bit optimistic that their enrollment, they believe, might actually go up a little bit because people are more likely to stay home and not spend the money to have their children go off into the unknown to another area, not knowing if it's as safe for them physically and health-wise, but also if they're going to learn online, maybe they could just do it locally. So that's what we're looking at on the community college side from some of my colleagues, from what they're looking at. They're hoping that things continue. But on our side, yes, our budget, half of our budget, our fee, or a little over half, are actually related to fees, collection of fees. The other half are the state dollars. So we have 2 sides to the coin here. If the state cuts some of our budget, which unfortunately I believe it might happen, again, as Senator Glazer said, it won't happen until probably late August, September. We've already started classes the 3rd week of August. So we've already had to put out money and hire people, hire faculty to teach our courses. And then we're hoping the students come. We're hoping that our students will continue their studies and didn't get discouraged by having to go online. And if we have to do online again next semester, that they have to do that. Then, and with the new students, we're not sure what's going to happen with them. I believe the transfer students that are ready to come, they're higher than they were last year in terms of new students. We believe we probably are going to have them. They're going to stay. A lot of them are local. So we believe they will come attend our university. The first-time freshmen, I'm not so sure. The intent to registers are down a little bit. We have until June 1, but it looks like, you know, everybody's waiting to see. And so I think a lot of first-time freshmen are wondering what they're going to do. We're trying to figure out, are we going to open in the fall? And that's the biggest question. It's the million-dollar question right now. Everybody's waiting for that. I believe those first-time freshmen are waiting for that. We're looking, can we safely open? Can we provide housing for students? Can we, right now we have 1,500 beds on campus. We have doubles and triples in rooms. Very likely we can have only one person per room. Can they share a bathroom? Like public health officers permit that. They did right now. I have 187 students still living on campus. They have no place else to go, or they were fearful that they're going to expose their family to potentially to the disease, or maybe they don't have internet access, whatever it was. 187 of the 1,500 chose to stay. The others, as the senator stated, we refunded the pro rata difference of their housing. We gave students back their parking dollars. So we've taken some losses that we're trying to cover. Amongst that, the CARES Act money, 7.3 million also we received to help fill some of the gaps. We're trying to figure out, as long as nobody's totally in the red on any of our departments, we're trying to figure out how to best strategically use that money. Can we use it to fill other gaps that will arise because of COVID? We'll have to wait for the state budget to come in. So we'll use that money appropriately as the federal government gave it to us, but we're going to try to use it as wisely as we possibly can so that we can prepare for the future. We do have some reserves. The state is well aware of the reserves of the university. We kept some dollars in case of emergency for exigencies. Will that tide us through? I'm not sure. Depends on both those two elements I talked about, what the state gives us, and then what kind of fee money we collect because students come or don't come. And so we're going to see how that all rolls out. We're trying to come up with, I'm calling them standard operating procedures. That phrase doesn't exist in the higher education. It exists in the military, other types of groups that have that. We are going to have standard operating procedures when we repopulate our campus. And when can that be? The uncertainties are so great, we don't know. I'm trying to come up with a plan to bring some of the people back, and whether or not it's face-to-face or at least letting faculty teach from the campus, from their labs, so they can have their labs working from there teaching. And some want to teach in their office because they don't have the distractions at home. And so can that be permissible? Can I do it safely so that people can come back safely? It's a very big question. The last thing I want to say is commencement. It is so sad. This is the hardest part for me. I struggle with this so much when we started to go into the shelter in place, that this is the moment that, you know, in high schools, colleges, everywhere. And with 60% first gen, this is the biggest moment of the lives of a lot of these people, for their families to come and celebrate and to really be able to celebrate the achievement of their child. And it is so hard to say that we can't have a commencement like that. We usually have 20,000 people at Hayward. We probably have about 3,000 people that come out to Concord. And so I do 3 ceremonies at Hayward campus, 20,000 each, and that's not going to happen. And we said we're going to postpone it. Can we have one in the future? I don't know. I don't know how soon we can gather 20 people together, much less 20,000 people. So that's one of the hardest things that has hit me the most, in terms of the people not being able to celebrate the way they want to, and to be honored in the way that I want to honor them for their perseverance, their grit, their determination to get through. So it's that's a very challenging one. We're doing a video for them, and it's going to be a personalized one. We've got a platform that pops out like an Evite, has your name under. I'm looking at Bob right in front of me, so I'm going to say, hey, Bob, congratulations. When the Evite pops open, and then we'll have some videos on there. And I've asked our graduates, do you have a faculty member or staff member who is significant to you, one or two? Give me their names, and we're going to get a video on them to video for you onto your personalized video. So it'll be somewhat personalized video, and you get to keep that forever. It doesn't go away in the cloud. The company we're working with says they'll be able to keep that forever. So that'll be theirs, their graduation ceremony, individualized as best we can to them. And so we're trying to do those kinds of things, but it doesn't replace the real thing. And nothing replaces the face-to-face interaction. Online education is possible, is good for some people, not good for everybody. And so I miss our students, I miss our faculty and staff, and that's what motivates me to do what I do. As Senator Glazer said, yes, I am extending my stay a little bit longer, because how could I walk away at this point in time from our wonderful students, faculty, and staff? There's no way I could do that. So with that, I'll end and leave it to any questions you have.
Thank you so much, President Morishita and Senator Glazer, for sharing a little about what we can expect to see imminently in the state budget process, and also what has already been underway in Hayward and in Concord to continue serving CSU East Bay students. I know we're all grateful to have a steady hand at the tiller in such challenging times, and that you were willing to postpone your retirement and continue leading CSU East Bay at such a difficult time. So with that, I want to make sure I don't bury the lead here, President Morishita. Can you share, how the business community in the East Bay can best support students at CSU East Bay right now, and what you're doing? I know you mentioned the donation opportunity. Anything in addition to that?
Sure. If there's any opportunity for that donation, I would greatly appreciate it. You can go online to our site. But I think what I would look to the business community is, we're trying to prepare the workforce. We're trying to prepare the students and the graduates who are going to be able to help you and your companies become more successful. So what I'd ask of you is, if you're going, as things shelter in place kind of loosens up and your business start to open up, if you can offer opportunities for our students, internships. Internships are a great way for students to try out the businesses that they seem like they're interested in, and for you to try them out, because then maybe they turn into an employee, somebody you want to hire as they graduate, or even before they graduate. But also, if you have positions open, our students would appreciate any kind of employment they can get at this point in time, and always have. So I say on that side, it's offering those opportunities, or even availing yourselves. We do different, we've actually had greater participation on some of our events that we've had in terms of bringing alumni in to talk to students, or others to talk to students. So if we could work out some things where, you could be a guest speaker just to a group of students that are interested in your line of work to talk about what you do, that'd be another way that would be very helpful to our students, just to give them a flavor of what it was like for you to get it through your career and move into your business and what your business does.
Thank you. And we're getting a couple questions in the chat in the Q&A feature. So just want to remind folks to drop any questions in there. Bill Bankhead at Los Medanos and Sheila Hughes from St. Mary's College, both are speaking to the quick pivot to online learning. President Morishita, this is something that you were speaking to, and perhaps Senator Glazer can chime in here as well. But Bill from Los Medanos is saying that they're still working to try to get laptops and Chromebooks, and are still in that same process of trying to determine what the fall will look like. Could you speak to President Morishita and Senator Glazer, perhaps from what you've heard from local education agencies or other post-secondary education leaders, what you're hearing about the continued need to help get technology equipment out to students? I know you were already trying to make sure your students have those essential supplies right now, President Morishita, but what else is needed there? And then, around the connectivity issue in terms of broadband access, if there's still work to be done there, how far along are we, and anticipating that we may still need that in the fall or the summer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go first, and maybe the senator can join in. It is still, right? I'm not sure that everybody has all the equipment they need. And so that's what we're trying to work at. I'm trying to see whether or not there's opportunity to assist our community colleges in our discussions that we had, our meeting that I convened, like I said, with the East Bay Community College presidents and chancellors. I said, maybe we need to work on a little bit of a consortium here. We have one within the entirety of the CSU, where we pool our purchasing power together for the 23 campuses. But maybe that could be extended out to some of the community colleges. And I know there already are discussions, the community colleges, the CSU and the UC, a lot of their business officers jointly get together to talk about purchasing and trying to do the power of the entirety of the public California higher education system. So there are discussions like that. So where we could assist each other, I think we will. The internet access is huge though, in terms of that. I mean, I've had trouble connectivity at my house at times when everybody seems probably in the neighborhood is trying to get on, or I have to shut down other devices in my house and ask my wife to turn her phone off or something, because it's all drawing off of that connection. So we do have to work at that. And the more we can work together, the better.
Well, the only thing that I would add is that at the micro level, it is the campuses, campus budgets, campus choices that they have to make, difficult ones. On the macro level, it is going to be the state budget for all the institutions of higher education, and certainly there'll be appropriate efforts to try to supplement the technology side of budgets, but it's still a pie, and how you slice it, the pie doesn't necessarily get bigger. Our job is to try to make that pie as big as it can be and allow the locals to make the best choices they can make on how to use the money well. But it is the overall big challenge that we're facing.
Thank you both. And, on this note of the, additional and really unprecedented, unexpected costs that our institutions are incurring right now, the lost revenue, and then, the need to anticipate additional expenses beyond this as the crisis is continued. President Morishita, can you speak to, you've quickly gotten aid out to students using the half of the CARES Act funding that's dedicated towards emergency student aid. And I know that there are going to be a lot of grateful families and students for that. Can you speak to maybe how you anticipate using the additional dollars coming to you through the CARES Act relief? And then President Morishita and Senator Glazier, if you have any insight into what's happening with, what I've heard as CARES Act 4 or phase 4 of the federal relief effort, and what additional funds might be able to do. And then, additional to that, there's already some dollars that Governor Newsom will have an opportunity to administer that can serve K-12 or post-secondary education, and any insight you might have into discussions around how those state dollars or federal dollars passing through the state might support some of these statewide needs that we're seeing.
I'll start off again, if that's okay with the Senator. I think in terms of the dollars that there are certain expenditures. Okay, so we have a total operating budget of the entirety of the university, somewhere around $280 million. And 232 million is really our general operating dollars, right? And the other dollars go into housing, parking, university union, our recreation and wellness center, and our university extension. The first four all have some debt obligations around buildings that they've had. And so say housing alone is $4.5 million. If I don't open housing, we have a $4.5 million hole of not having any revenue that needs to be covered immediately. And so each of those has some debt obligations that we have to take care of. Out of our $232 million general operating budget, 80% of that is salaries and wages and benefits. And then probably about 12% of that are mandatory obligations. Again, debt service types of obligations, obligations for contracts that we have, utilities, all those kinds of things. And maybe so 8% of our operating budget is somewhat considered discretionary. Now, one benefit of this shelter in place, our travel budget. We've saved $800,000 to $1 million over this period of time on our travel budget. And next year's travel budget will probably be similar in terms of the expenditure of savings. So there are savings, just as we all know, We haven't paid, if you haven't been having to get out, you don't have to pay your gas bills, or you don't have to charge up your electric vehicles with electricity because you're not driving as much. So there are some savings, but it is really about people. And so that's the part. So far, with this year's current budget, and even the expenditures we've had to make outside, we have not, we have kept everybody employed and paid, okay? Whether they can telecommute from home or they couldn't. And the issue will come on July 1, we go into our next fiscal budget. What can we guarantee to people at that point in time? And that's going to be the difficult part for us in terms of that and the decisions that we have to make. Senator?
First, I note that that's been very gracious by the universities to do that. In private business, as you've seen, there's been a lot of layoffs and furloughs, and I hope that there's appreciation for that, because there's a cost for it, and not sure that's something that's sustainable, but we'll see. There is the potential for another, I guess, CARES Act 4. I did talk with Congressman Swalwell about it yesterday. That education is that we're hopeful that education will be a part of that, as well as local and state governments, because that money then trickles down to our education systems. So we did talk about that, and there is some target numbers that, they talk about trillions. It doesn't really mean anything to me. You can say whatever trillions you want to say, and what does it really mean to my local colleges and schools and cities? It's very hard to translate that, but there is efforts being made to try to support continued subsidies for public institutions that have suffered so greatly. Hey, let me mention, because of the previous question about the digital divide, my staff provided me with some information. They're listening in. Thank you to them. They mentioned that the Department of Education has created a digital divide task force that's focused on this technology gap issue. They've asked the service providers to provide free guest access to all California students. Executives at AT&T, Comcast, Cox Communications, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon were asked to provide more details on their efforts to bring connectivity into the homes of students from low-income and rural communities, including providing services for free. And I know there's at least one of those telecommunications executives on this call, or this, what do you call this, the town hall. So I know that they're working internally to try to do that, and that would be really valuable for our kids. So thank you to them. And it is a persistent problem in so many places.
That's great news to hear that. Wonderful. For K through 12 and higher ed.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And making my job as moderator easy, and heading off one of the questions from our attendees before I could ask it, who'd been asking about the ability for the state to work with service providers to provide low or no cost access for students. So, President Morishita, you mentioned that really the two sources of revenue for the university being from the state and from the students in terms of fees and tuition. We've had questions come in on the chat asking this in both directions. I'm well aware that both universities were considering tuition increases just a few months ago due to the need to serve more students and to have the resources with which to do that. But also another question on the chat, that given the different mode of instruction and delivery to students, that might come with a different cost structure and perhaps lower cost for students. So any sense right now of whether there might need to be either a tuition increase, or has there been any discussion so far about pricing at a different rate given online instruction delivery?
Okay, the CSU back in November, the Board of Trustees voted on a budget proposal that went to the governor and to the legislature, and that did not include any tuition fee increase. It was clear that we were not going to seek a tuition fee increase and that we would just seek more state support to continue our efforts, as the Senator said, particularly in terms of our graduation initiative 2025 to improve the graduation rates and persistence rates of our students. So there had been no discussion of a tuition fee increase, and there is no discussion right now that is anywhere near going on for that. But in terms of online education, the difficult part, teaching online in a very integrated way, and one that is brings out the best in the students and the faculty, is not cheaper. It actually takes more time for our faculty, because what happens when you start teaching online, all the students think you're available 24/7, like they are. And so the faculty actually, I believe they actually possibly work harder than they already do teaching face-to-face. My faculty work very hard teaching face-to-face, but the online is demanding in a different kind of way that is not cheaper. So that's the press that's come, in terms of other universities across the country. Some of them were teaching their online courses, teaching or charging lesser amounts than they were for the face-to-face. Ours is the same. And so it unfortunately isn't cheaper. It's one of the things when Governor Brown was looking at MOOCs, I had prepared a white paper in terms of, because we probably amongst the CSU had done more online education. And we did a little white paper for him that talked about online education, how it was as effective in terms of persistence in graduation across the board for our students, face-to-face or online, but that unfortunately the cost wasn't cheaper. Doing a MOOC is very different than doing a classroom where you're trying to teach a particular subject and trying to touch and make sure these people are all learning. So unfortunately, it's not cheaper. We're going to look at other fees that we have addressed, right? That if student health services is available yet for students, because we have counseling and student health services, mental health counseling, and other things that still are provided by the fees that paid there. But students are also paying for a recreation and wellness center, like I said, that has a debt obligation to it, but they're not getting the services that they normally would. So could I lower the fees to only maybe charge to cover that debt service? That's a possibility, right? But some of the fees that students don't have access to the services that they had before because they're not on campus, those are ones that we could probably look at and consider, right? But the tuition costs, I can't see those going down. We charge an amount of money that used to be free. I mean, I had a very great education from the University of California at Berkeley, where I paid $638 a year, right, for my education. It doesn't cost, it costs a heck of a lot more at UC and costs more than that at the CSU, but they still are the lowest amongst across the country in terms of the kind of education that we're providing.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add would be that even the discussions about tuition this year, given the conversations from the trustees in the fall, was in the 3% range. Between the year 2008 and 2013, tuition, under those financial circumstances, tuition doubled. It completely doubled in that 5-year period of time. So that gives you an indication of how significant the impacts could be on our student community if that is seen as a way out. Now, during that period of time, tuition only covered half the shortfall, okay? Not the whole shortfall. Half the shortfall was covered by tuition, and the rest had to be made up through budget cuts and reserves. So that gives you some context, at least in that period of time, how they handled it versus how we might handle it going forward. None of it very good news. Bob Linscheid, you had a front row seat to all that difficult those difficult choices, and maybe you have some insight to share, but it's not looking good.
Yeah, if I could comment on that, thanks for the reminder on that, Steve. I feel like we're, like you said, experiencing deja vu all over again. I think the thing that resonates with me, and Leroy brought it up as it relates to enrollment and the community colleges, there's no doubt that this will be a potential benefit to them. My question would be could you accommodate, Leroy, if funding were available, an expansion of your student enrollment? In other words, I'm assuming that you would accept every student that qualified for East Bay if you had space and the funding for it. If there was a spike all of a sudden in California where folks decided, you know what, I'd be best to go to college right now, than to and try to find work. Could the CSU, if we get the proper funding, and maybe that may be a good argument for CARES Act 4 in that respect. So I'd love to hear both Leroy and Senator Glazer's remarks on that.
Yes, I think, Bob, I mean, because half of our revenue is based upon the fees, right? So every 100 California residents generate a tuition fee of around $570,000. Okay, every 100 California residents. Every 100 non-residents, this includes international students or domestic non-residents, generates $1.4 million for us. That's what has happened, and I don't think it's always been said very well, is that the non-resident students help to subsidize the education of the California residents. You really take that money and you do it that way. And so we have about 8% of our student population that is non-resident. And so then they help to subsidize the education of California residents. So it's really a blow to our budget if we lose that. But Bob, I would take as many students as we could possibly handle, right? I mean, depends on how much is cut on the state side, but
Yeah.
that revenue generation of 50% of our budget, because the students are enrolling, we can educate them. Can we educate them as well? Will we have the opportunity to do all the things that we want to do? Maybe not. There still might have to be some adjustment there, but we can provide to offer the sections that are needed. So we're working very hard at that. We would take the students. All right. If you gave me 1,000 more students, maybe I don't know about 1,000, maybe I'd say 500 more students, we could probably teach them and do that. So I don't think it's a matter of capacity at this point in time. It just matters how much this other side of the equation gets lowered, right? Because if lowered too much, then we can't and continue to provide all the services we want to provide. So that's the hard part of trying to balance those two out. We could probably absorb some and then have the enrollment, but we can't absorb too much. And what that tipping point is, I don't have a number there to give you percentage wise. But I think, both you and Senator, having lived through the recession with us hand in hand, I mean, that tipping point is there, because even when we come back and we've gotten monies, those monies are all earmarked, pretty much. It's just like the senator was talking about the state budget. Our budgets are earmarked. A lot of it is compensation increases. A lot of it is mandatory cost increases. Some of it went to capital. And the discretionary part is the enrollment increase money, because the money that I'm given by the state, along with the fees, 100% of that doesn't have to go into the classroom instruction. It helps us on the margins. It's kind of like everything that everybody does personally. The money on the margins is what makes a difference for us surviving and living the life we want to live. That marginal difference will be taken away. And so that's the part that we won't have. But can we have enough to do the basic things? I hope so.
I would just add that the international student issue is a much more of an acute issue for UC. Berkeley and UCLA, I think that they enroll about 20%, maybe a little higher than that, of international students, and obviously COVID-19 is going to seriously impact that community and that revenue source. It's like a double whammy now. We criticize them because they enrolled so many, though they did it because of financial reasons. I mean, there's obviously enrichment that comes from people from all over the world being on a campus. We love that. But I know that the drive was more than just enrichment. It was the need for revenue because the state was cutting back. And now this is going to be a double whammy there. I think one of the unanswered questions, Bob, is enrollment. Traditionally, in recessions, people do want to go back to college since the job market's bad.
Right.
But given the online learning that maybe how school starts in the summer and fall, it may not be so attractive. And so I think the community colleges, I hope the enrollment there is robust. I hope it is at the 4 years, but it is really a big unanswered question. I don't know if we were to if we were to cut the systems, whether they could increase tuition retroactively. I don't think they could. So you have a student, so they probably couldn't start that tuition until the spring, but all that conversation in the summer is not going to be a good conversation for getting students enthused about going into debt and going back and growing in their knowledge base. So it's a big question mark, and it's another element of great worry, because we know how important our higher education institutions are for our economy, for so many things that we care about, value in California, and it's all at risk.
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you both thinking about how we can continue to keep the universities accessible to California students, knowing that in the past recession, as you've both spoken to, we were turning away tens of thousands of students each year from our California State University system, and now are looking down the barrel of a significant workforce gap in terms of the number of college graduates we need to meet workforce demands. So the other element of admissions is yield, and which students are actually showing up on campus or to the virtual campus in the fall. So one question that I had is around learning loss and the significant disruption we've seen to the educational experience of, our seniors who were already intending to matriculate on to post-secondary education, and also returning students. Could you perhaps speak to, anything that the university can do or the state can do to try to prepare our systems for receiving those students in the fall, and helping position them to be successful, knowing that there were already some really major efforts underway at the CSU in particular around rethinking how we receive students who have previously been classified as underprepared and are now being placed in a credit-bearing coursework with additional support?
So 2 things that we're trying to figure out for this summer is one is for our continuing students. How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them motivated to continue to learn? So we're trying to see whether we have the funding to be able to provide them with one course they pay for, and that could be through financial aid, or it could be through their own monies, and give them a second course for free. So we're looking at that possibility and whether that financial model works for us. And if it does, we'll do that for our continuing students. So to do that, and then for our new students, what we'll do is probably have a expanded summer bridge program. Summer bridge programs usually are programs for new students to come reside on the campus for maybe a week, get some intensive instruction and learning process going, and get introduced to the campus life. And so we're going to do that virtually. And so maybe we expand that. So maybe we engage the students in a broader way there, give them some actual units, and then expand that summer bridge. So for them, that's what we're going to do. For our faculty, some of the CARES Act money we got on institutional change that had to occur because of COVID, we're going to provide training for our faculty. So we'll probably give them a stipend. Maybe, I don't want to go figure, because then people might be listening and figure out they're tied to that. But to give them a stipend, because during the summer they're not paid by us, and to give them a stipend to go through a training process so they can be better prepared to teach that online course come the fall. And some of the faculty who are more seasoned on using online might be the mentors for that training. So that'll be part of it. So we'll try to prepare better our faculty to teach online, and then to have our students continue to be engaged. So those are the plans that we're trying to work at right now.
I don't have anything really to add to that. The preparation is, the campuses have done a really good job, I think, of identifying how to create connection with their students and how important that is for retention. And also to not create roadblocks to their success, but to break them down and to streamline them. And I think that's part of the real improvements that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is the university leadership really stepping into that space. It's not just about access, it's not just about fees and costs, and it's not just about quality, it's about success. And I think that focus on how we get that student, and not just a number that's in our system, but a real person with real life fears and experiences that they have to embrace and understand. I think that's part of the maturing leadership of our universities. And I think that's why they're we've seen such progress made and why it's in jeopardy now. So I think there's a lot of focus on that, but obviously the budgetary circumstances are really going to create a lot of turbulence.
Jake, part of the answer to that question too related to the preparedness of the students, and I didn't address that, and that is that, you know, we have made some major changes in terms of how we are preparing our students, right? We no longer had the remedial courses, right? So every class that a student takes counts for units. And so we really did become very successful the past 2 years in terms of those students who came in a little less prepared. The passing rate of getting through the English courses as well as the math courses improved dramatically. And particularly, we doubled and tripled the numbers in terms of African American and Latino success in those courses. So we're really proud of that. Can we keep that up without the personal interaction and the kind of peer assistance going on? I'm not sure, right? That's what we're struggling with also. So the other component is, how do we improve our student services outreach part to our students via the outreach, right? And so part of it, what I've been putting out to the campus is, so for the continuing students, if we can get lists of people that faculty, staff can contact, just to give a call, to touch base and say, how you doing, Jake? You know, nothing in particular I'm calling about, but just to ask you how you're doing. Signed up for your classes? How'd you do? You know, things like that. Just a personal outreach. I think the more we do that, the better.
Our university leaders and faculty have done such an exceptional job implementing that executive order from the system to reapproach how we do remedial education and help more students succeed, that you know, I'm really heartened to hear you're thinking about how we can continue to maintain that momentum. I think my colleague Bob has a question that maybe.
Yeah, I think this, to me, it's Leroy in particular. A lot of obvious questions are, can all courses be taught online? And I'm reminded that Cal State East Bay is one of the few campuses in the CSU that has a nursing program. And you have community colleges around that offer nursing programs as well. Not only because of the pandemic, but the huge growth in palliative care and other kinds of care programs. In light of the pandemic, how is the nursing program changed or adjusted or pivoted to provide more clinical support for those that are in nursing programs?
Right. So the students, nursing students who are graduating now, they've completed all their clinical work. So they're going to be fully prepared to go out into the workforce. It was our junior population, our junior class level nursing students who are able to do the clinical placements. And so they're going to have to do that in their senior year, hopefully. Hopefully they get into the clinical placements. And so what we're probably going to do, unfortunately, is we're going to reduce the number of nursing students we're going to bring into the junior year. We're going to do the opposite of what is going to be needed for the workforce, for the nursing world, because we won't have the clinical placements. Otherwise, we'll have a backlog of these students forever being delayed in those clinical placements. So it's a problem that we're trying to deal with right now. I mean, the Nursing Certification Association has lessened from 75% clinical in-person placements to 50%. And so you can do the others through simulations, but you still need that 50%. So it's a problem that we're unfortunately struggling with right now in terms of the students we're going to be able to bring into the next class. So because otherwise they will be jammed up forever and they won't be prepared. So it's a big issue for us right now. And how do we do it safely? You know, the nurses, the hospitals and other agencies, understandably, were very concerned, right? If we brought in our students to do clinical placements, the liability, right, that they would encounter, because how could they protect them as much as they needed to be protected, just as their staff? They were trying to protect their staff and didn't have all the PPE stuff, right? I mean, so I don't blame them whatsoever. It was difficult because the clinical placements weren't occurring. So we're going to have an issue there, and the community colleges are in the same boat with the clinical placements for their students then prepare. So Senator Glazier and I had a good, as I said, we had a discussion yesterday, and so we were talking about how can we do more things together, the community colleges and the CSU, or the UC and the community college. So we are having some good discussions with we got some grant money to work on a community college, and we're going to do that, and then hopefully it could be spread to other community college districts, but more of partnering together about doing things and having a more seamless connection between the two. A student can maybe go back and forth, kind of like a dual enrollment, like you have from high school to the community colleges. Maybe we do that. Maybe we set up something like that between the community colleges and CSU to do that. What do we do about our nursing students? And we've already been talking about that at East Bay, about maybe there are some things that we could then have the community colleges do that we won't do, but we'll do this other part of training that is required for the nurses to get into the RN and that thing. Right now, the Bachelor of Science of Nursing is their big thing, but how can we work with the community colleges, our partners there, so that they can have their students ready then to step off into this part if they so choose. So we're trying to look at those kind of discussions. And so I think I heartened the senator a little bit when I said that we were actually talking about some of that stuff already, because it's stuff that he would love us to do. But we are already starting some of that discussion, and we're going to work with him to see if there are things that might need to be changed on the state legislative side that would help us to do that more efficiently.
Yeah, as I would only add that President Morita has heard from me, I like breaking down these silos. I love partnerships. I think we can, if we focus on the students and the institutions can if we can work together there, I think we can make that student experience better, more economical, more successful. I did write a letter to Governor Newsom earlier this year asking him to reduce the requirements of clinical work from 75 to 50%. So I was happy to see him take that action on an executive order to do that. And so we are paying attention to this. We love our nursing students, we love our nursing programs, and they were really almost the first to reach out to us as we went into lockdown to talk about the problems that the students were facing, and we looked for ways to get through it. But it's another thing that will come out of this whole pandemic is everybody's rethinking lots of stuff, working from home, working remotely, online education. There's so many things that obviously are incredibly disruptive, but out of that disruption is fresh thinking about how we can do our work. Nobody wants to diminish quality. No one wants to diminish personal contact, but we do have to find ways to do things better. And the academy is pretty slow to adjust to what we would call modernization. It'd be a wonderful spirited conversation which all enjoy having over a beer or a glass of wine. But it is, I think people like me will be pushing them to rethink some things, as basic as rethinking general education. As basic as rethinking about in classroom instruction in certain places and circumstances. So, and I think it's healthy. So I hope out of this terrible crisis we're facing that we will come out of it looking for ways to do things smarter and better if we're able to. And partnerships are a part of that.
I'd like to add to that part that the senator just said, because what we're trying to do is embrace the things that are positive about the changes that we've gone through. One of the things, one of my super faculty members, he's in physics. I love him dearly. He's fantastic. He was saying when he first started, his office hours were just jammed. Students were coming to him all the time. And then even though he's all great and everything, it's kind of gone downhill. And he found what happened as we went online. He got more students during his office hours now online than he was before we had moved over. So he's going to keep that as part of how he interacts with students, the online part, because they might not have the time to come in, or they may be a little bit scared, more intimidated, right? Our youth are very comfortable in this environment. I hate it, okay? But they are very comfortable. So when I talk to our students, I've interviewed them for the Panetta Institute. they were very comfortable sitting in their little abode, not coming to my office, right? Because it's got to be intimidating to come to the office of the president for the first time ever. And so they were very comfortable. I was the one that was nervous in this interview process. I'm interviewing them. So I think one part is that. And then what we found is that some students who are less likely to raise their hand in person are raising their hands. This is what faculty have told me. In the classroom, in the online classroom, they're getting more involvement from students who, you know, because it was halfway through the semester, that didn't raise their hand or didn't speak up in class. They're speaking up online. So so you're exactly right, Senator. We need to keep the good parts of this, expand upon that, and then change the rest.
Building on that exact theme, Leroy, I know that the East Bay Leadership Council as an organization, we've gotten a lot of good feedback about moving to some of our work online, like this task force meeting. And so we really appreciate both you and Senator Glazer joining us. I am mindful it's 10:02, and I'm grateful for the generosity of your time today. You know, I am a proud UC alum, having attended UCLA and graduated in 4 years. With plenty of scholarship support and no debt. And that has been an extraordinary launch point for my life. So I'll continue to be a warrior for increased funding and seeing what we can do to get back to the state funding levels that were a thing of the past, where, you know, the UC wouldn't need international students if they had a whole lot more support, and CSU had much more support, and the community colleges. So where I started the conversation was that in a time of a recession for the economy is exactly the time when we need to be investing in our students and in our institutions to make sure that we get the workforce that we need, we get the training that we need. And I look forward to working in partnership with you all through our organization to achieve what we can together. So thank you so much, Senator Glazer. Thank you so much, Leroy. I really appreciate all that you're doing. And I don't know if Bob and Jake have a closing thought, but I hope everybody joins us on May 28th for our luncheon series about housing.
I just want to thank you. Appreciate it very much. And Steve, I miss our walks.
Yeah, me too.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
for joining.
Thank you. Have a good day. Be safe out there.
Yep, be safe and healthy. Take care.
Thanks everybody.